So for me, I started off commanding 30 people as the youngest person as a platoon commander, and then going on operations the last 9 years in Special Forces, where rank meant nothing. Your competence and character were what defined you. I got to learn so much about professional competence and personal character and the applications of those in leadership, and then understanding resilience and ultimately what is emotional resilience, how being whole and part to yourself and true to your own purpose is actually what enables you to unlock that emotional power and be truly authentic, and appreciating that an authentic voice actually carries its own authority. At the end of the day, as long as you're authentic in your person and in your purpose, everything else will flow through. Your ability to lead and inspire, and your ability to actually lead and inspire yourself along the way.
So today I want to talk about being authentic, and look, quite frankly, when you hear that word, that could trigger many different kinds of reactions. Some people are a big fan of the word. Some people are like, "Oh God, don't talk to me about that. It's so goddamn cliche." Look, if there's anything that I've actually come to learn and about being authentic, is much like a lot of words actually, or things in life, is that we all have our very different take on it. We have a different interpretation of certain things. And so today what I'm interested in talking about is the world of being authentic. What does it mean? What does it not mean? What does it stand for? Why are we talking about it? When we talk about authentic leadership, what actually are we talking about? So today I can't tell you, seriously, this is a remarkable opportunity for me today, talking with somebody who I quite frankly think is the gun when it comes to being authentic, given his past experience. We have Heston Russell, not Heston Blumen. What's his name?
Yeah, Blumenthal.
Blumenthal. No. We have the Aussie Heston Russell, who is a consultant and coach. He's an ambassador for Swiss 8, which is a not-for-profit that supports veterans with mental health. Yep. He's on a big campaign and mission around combating I suppose, old style formats of leadership, and talking more importantly about inclusion and diversity, teams and high performance culture, and being authentic and authentic leadership. Yep. But let me just highlight before we get into conversation and I introduce Heston, is that his experience and passion for this comes out of serving 16 years in the military, and his experience of what happened for himself in being true to himself, and his experience with leadership and his whole views on it. So this is not just an opinion piece. We are not sitting here talking about what we think is the right thing. We are really digging into and talking about Heston's personal experience and how he's landed on being authentic and authentic leadership. So thank you for coming in.
Absolutely, pleasure. Thank you for having me in, Kylie.
So I want to start with what it is that you're actually now currently working on when you say authentic leadership.
For sure. Really great question. So for me, my experience comes from probably one of the longest lineages of professional development in leadership. In the military, we're taught command, leadership and management, and then practicing that ultimately on combat operations, of which I've served 5 times in different war zones overseas, and had the chance as a commander and as a person to lead under the most extreme circumstances, and what that's helped me learn about myself and helped me learn about leadership. And I guess I've really only recently in the last year arrived on authentic leadership as a part of my own sort of emotional intelligence journey, and also just finally sitting with the right people and having conversations like this, helping to unpick and unpackage all that content we have to provide the context for our own lives and how to help others. So I guess in the military, you're taught all sorts of stages of leadership, types of leadership, applications of leadership, combat, career leadership, everything in between. Leading by example, laissez-faire, authoritarian. And I spent my entire career trying to implement those and be the best leader I can be. And the whole time, particularly in officer training in the military, you're sort of the newest person to the group until you would then establish yourself and get experience under your belt. So for me, I started off commanding 30 people as the youngest person as a platoon commander, and then going on operations the last 9 years in Special Forces, where rank meant nothing. Your competence and character were what defined you. I got to learn so much about professional competence and personal character and the applications of those in leadership, and then understanding resilience and ultimately what is emotional resilience, how being whole and part to yourself and true to your own purpose is actually what enables you to unlock that emotional power and be truly authentic, and appreciating that an authentic voice actually carries its own authority. At the end of the day, as long as you're authentic in your person and in your purpose, everything else will flow through. Your ability to lead and inspire, and your ability to actually lead and inspire yourself along the way.
So you telling me they were training you this, they were teaching you this, educating you in this in the military?
They were teaching me the IQ, the intelligence side of the house. You learn all the principles, all the fundamentals, all the foundations. You know, you read back to great battles and great leadership experiences, but it's only then once you actually then get to apply that to someone personally and emotionally and understand what motivates them, see them in combat and watch, you know, all forms of purpose fly out the window when they're surviving and fighting for their own life, through to struggling with their own personal circumstances that don't necessarily mould with the professional military uniform aspects and perspectives. I mean, and we'll talk about that soon. There's a lot to do with myself, you know, accepting myself along the way, taking the time to focus on what truly made me tick, particularly when it didn't conform to what I thought I was meant to be.
God, there's so much in that. Well, I think the standout for me just right now, as you talk about that, is the different areas of one's life, like being able to, you know, when you're in flight, you know, on the field or, you know, doing what you need to do to survive.
Yep.
You know, you kind of, everything else I imagine, you know, what I heard there is when you're doing that, you're really dealing with what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
But then there are those times when you're not in that space, and then you've got to kind of balance that with who am I, where does this conflict or not conflict, and that's kind of what you were saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, when you say that, Heston, the most immediate thing that comes to life for me is not only what we're going to dig into and talk about being authentic right now, but I just want to acknowledge anyone who's, you know, in the military, been in the military, is a family member of the military, and, you know, like, I'm just present to the world of what that looks like. Not only clearly for you as an individual when you're somebody in it, but then no doubt how that looks for everybody in the family, or, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the military is an incredible experience. Like, I give many talks. People in corporates like to hear about combat leadership and all these sorts of things. And
yeah, it sounds sexy and exciting,
it
right?
does. And at the end of the day, honestly, combat leadership is actually the easiest context of leadership for me, because the purpose is like so well defined. You know, we're in the fight and flight, we're in the survival mode, that type of thing.
Right.
It's actually that career leadership when the purpose and the motivations become not so clear and skewed, that I found the most difficult personal requirements there. But you're right. I mean, the biggest thing we deal with at the moment, my role with Swiss 8, is actually those veterans transitioning from defence. We'll get into this about, you know, culture and everything else in between, but when you're in the military system and you go through such extreme circumstances, the culture is the force field that protects you while you're going through those, and the net that catches you when you fall off. And it's actually in transitioning from defence, when people leave that culture, when they sort of leave that common understanding of what they're going through, that our men and women, unfortunately, are really suffering, falling off the wagon, suffering from anxiety, depression, and taking their own lives. You know, we've lost more veterans to suicide than we have in combat operations over the last 10 years. So,
Oh, my
I mean,
goodness.
and it's the family units that are there trying to deal with and support and cope with them. So, absolutely, as you shouted out, like, hats off, respect, and it's a very difficult task for them at home.
So when did you make the transition?
Technically, I discharged from the military January of last year, but that was after about nearly 2 years worth of long service leave that I took at, you know, half pay in between. So my last deployment was to Iraq, and then I came back at the start of 2017. And from that time, I essentially commenced my own transition from defence.
And can I ask, how was that transition for you personally?
It was a lot. So I actually transitioned straight out of defence into bringing a brand called Barry's Boot Camp over to Australia from the US with my partner. So I sort of jumped professionally from one thing to the next that provided me with great purpose. Personally, I finally acknowledged that I was a gay man and was public about that, including, like, you know, opening up my social media and things like that. And it was actually the last year where I actually left the Barry's boot camp and was sort of left to myself, and have gone through a relationship breakup over the last 4 months, that I've actually struggled the most, that I've lost that professional purpose, I've lost my personal purpose, and really get to understand, you know, that mental health isn't a weakness, it's a reality, and like fitness, we need to train it. So it's been a long and very interesting and very humbling journey. But again, as we're here to talk about, it just has truly, I think, made me better as a leader, helped me be more authentic with myself, helped me appreciate my own vulnerability as opposed to weakness.
Yes. And when was the point that you, when did you start doing the work with Swiss 8?
On and off since about the middle of last year. The founder, Adrian, I sort of knew through the military is sort of, one or two spaces in between knowing each other, and just saw some of the stuff that they were doing. And then as of December last year, I really got on board with them
Right.
more so full
So
time.
was this after you'd gone through your jump out of was that when you first started experiencing your own kind of lack of purpose that you got on board with that? Because
Yeah.
you started to see that
Yeah, absolutely. So as a part of transitioning from the military, you go through the Department of Veterans Affairs process to get, injuries and all sorts of stuff sorted through, which I'd honestly put off.
Right.
And that's probably one of the most frustrating and annoying processes you've ever been through, unfortunately. There's no empathy behind it. It's all just red tape, different siloed compartments. It's honestly one of the biggest issues we're facing at the moment as veterans transitioning. And it was during that struggle that I just started to run into people who are going through the same issues through different advocates and whatnot, and that's what brought us together. In united struggle, we forged the best bonds of friendship, and we sort of stuck strong since then.
So during that process, is this where Swiss 8 operates to support the transitioning piece now, or are those resources and tools and things part of the process?
No, so that process is a purely administrative process, which can only be handled by the government agency, that is DVA. Where Swiss 8 is really coming into play is to support the mental and emotional health of those people going through it.
Yeah.
So in the defence, what you don't realise is you're actually in a very routine structure. And we're not talking about, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full. We're talking about fitness, nutrition,
Yes.
even sleep, work schedules, actually sort of knowing what's got coming up, communication. There's not a lot of uncertainty within the military day-to-day business structure. There's uncertainty in deployments and operations overseas. But all of that uncertainty is removed from your day-to-day life. And then remove yourself from that defence system, from that ecosystem. Uncertainty, isolation, loss of purpose, loss of tribalism. These are all the things that are starting to increase the anxiety and depression levels within our transitioning service members. So Swiss 8, it's an app. It's looked to set up a program that people can literally schedule their day, schedule their week with a workout, with a fitness plan, with some mindfulness, some meditation, with some sleep discipline, with some time management. There are all these sort of resources to help you literally plug into your calendar and start to set up a bit of the routine that you had within the military to help you have that sort of, that sort of net around you to help you really facilitate what you need to do.
Yeah, look, that's so fabulous. I think, God, when you and I were planning on talking today, this part of the conversation, this is unpredictable for me because, as you clearly know, right now, we've got a huge amount of people who, just last night, I got a message from a lady. I've just finished a piece of work with Qantas, and it's incredibly humbling, of course, because you've got people in there who have been their entire career, and so it's their entire life, right? And so I'm just reminded of that with you because that's much like the same thing for a lot of people in the military, right? You get into the military, you're in there for life, so you've got all of that security and that structure, and of course, this week is probably a big week for these people because now they've just announced another 4,000 jobs, but they've just announced the outsourcing of a whole big thing. So it's causing a lot of, instability there for those people. But they're kind of going through what you're describing, right?
You're on the money. I mean, we've done a bit of work with Channel 7 recently supporting the charity. As you know, with charities and not-for-profits, it's all about fundraising. And the best context we can say is that the Australian population is literally currently with COVID, been going through what military members have experienced in transitioning from defence.
Yes.
Uncertainty, isolation, immediate changes and extreme changes to their living circumstances. And the whole thing is it's actually just a transition of culture. Whether it's the culture of the society you're in or the workplaces have their own culture. You're different at work than you are at home. There's different ways that you achieve your personal value, your own love languages within those different ecosystems and those different working spaces. So the body of work I want to do personally now is really work on that transition piece. We're going to go through so many transitions in our lives, be it through jobs, through relationships, whatever it is. Just learning to break down and isolate those key things that help us feel value, derive our new purpose, and then motivate us to move forward. That's really what I've got the real opportunity to discover throughout my career, and is probably the most relevant. I literally feel the most relevant now with what's going on with COVID.
Yes.
Because our job has just been designed to look at these adverse situations and find the best. And I'm a lazy person, so easiest way through them.
Yes. So I just want to put the spotlight on what you just said around the culture piece because. I'm not going to generalise, but I'll say that one of the biggest complaints I often hear when people are in an organisation, or let's just in any community where there's a culture,
Yep.
right? That one of the biggest struggles is how do I can't have what I really want, or the reason I don't have success or I don't experience is because of the culture, right?
Yep.
And so here we are on one level going, oh, it's because of the culture that I can't express myself. But now what we're talking about, take the culture out, and we're pretty effed up, right?
Yep.
So I've never, I think there's always just new views on certain things.
Yeah.
When you just said that, I'm like, oh my God. And, is it really serving us to say, actually, it's the culture? Is it really the culture?
Well, the biggest thing for me is you have to understand what your own personal ethos is, your own personal values. So literally like what your personal values are that you've derived from your own morals. And then also like how you feel valued. And I do a presentation of the love languages. I don't know if you read the book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yes.
So remove the word love, replace with the word value, and
Right.
understand how you feel value. And I've done a bit of work with people during this COVID time. So many people through the isolation and change of circumstances have actually got to fully understand how they feel valued through what they've actually missed the most. You know, you would have those friends who's really missed out going to restaurants and spending time with people, through to those people who really miss, physical connection or physical touch, words of affirmation, communication, and actually understanding who you are first. And this is the key part about being authentic first up, understanding your personal ethos, essentially your own personal culture, and then going to and finding a professional role whereby your personal values map to the professional values of the company, and your purpose in what the vision or outputs of that company are the first key steps to make sure that your personal culture maps to your professional culture, and that's where it's at. So I myself, leaving defence over the last year, have had 4 or 5 different jobs that I jumped into, just literally to pay the bills. And at every time there was a fracture of my personal culture because I didn't identify with the culture of the professional system. So, I mean, it's a very unique time coming out of COVID with, I know so many people are struggling with employment and everything else in between, but you know what? So are businesses, and those businesses who haven't been fostering a positive culture, who've been so focused on profitability, are going to find themselves with a workforce that is full of people who've taken the time to now identify what makes them tick. And if there's one bit of advice I can give is to make sure you've taken this time to map out your own personal ethos, your own values, what your motivation, what your true purpose is, and go and find a job that fulfills that, because that is going to make sure that you are fulfilled personally and professionally in what you do, and not simply sit there and say, oh, I hate the culture, I hate this. If you don't like the culture, then you need to change. If there's an issue with a culture within a business, then that's a leadership issue. And I'm sure we'll get into that.
Well, we are, and I'm going to have to take my jacket off because I'm getting all heated up about this conversation.
Good.
So can we go there? Because this is all about being authentic, right? So,
Absolutely.
So one of the things I'll confess about now is I know, right, that when coaching people or even going into an organisation, I know that you saying it's the culture is the problem is bullshit.
Yep.
Right?
For sure.
I know that, right? But it's not possible to, when someone's stuck and hasn't gone through the journey, then it doesn't occur to them that they can't hear what you've got to say. So it doesn't serve me to go to somebody and say, hey, it's actually got nothing to do with the culture. If I start with that, we are off, right?
Sure.
Not going to go so well.
Culture's the byproduct.
That's exactly
culture's,
right.
Yeah.
But come on, Heston, what is culture? Let's just define what culture is.
Culture is the environment a leader creates for others to grow and develop and operate within.
Yes, and how does that thrive? It is from a set of individuals acting and behaving in certain ways.
Bottom
right?
up, top down. Everyone meets in the middle.
It's the whole thing,
Yep.
right? Yes?
Absolutely.
So break it down. Let's bring in, at the end of the day, I can't even get my words out.
You're good,
I'm
you're good.
Man, right? But culture, no matter where you are, is the creation of a group of individuals in every dimension that's involved, right?
Yep.
Behaving a certain way, so therefore, the thought process and the emotions that go into the creation and then behave a certain way. Ultimately, then group behavior, right?
For sure, yep.
So
I call it the collective emotional intelligence.
oh, beautiful. You're good with words.
Oh, yeah.
So if it is culture, at what point do we go, well, then I have something to do with that because I am part of the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of, I call it like bubbles. Everyone has their own bubbles that they're able to influence, or your spheres of influence, and where that influences other overlaps with other people, that's your opportunity. It's such a difficult conversation. I do a lot of work with big corporates through to like small founders. And, the businesses where the founder has started from the bottom and is still there as the CEO, you see the culture has been derived through because the culture is what they created. And then big corporates, you come to that custodianship. And particularly in this world, I left the military, which is one of the largest, essentially not-for-profits organizations, because you're focusing on your effectiveness and your outputs, not focusing on profit. Whereas everything these days comes down to red and black in the P&L statement, and people prioritizing that over external culture, outwards facing, billable hours versus internal, job satisfaction, personal value, professional value. It's such a difficult conversation. And that's what I say. All I can say is people entering into a business need to do their work and make sure that they know how they personally feel valued within an organization and then look to map that to professionally. And then once you're within the organization, okay, if there's something that needs to happen or something that needs to change, like it starts with you.
Yeah. Well, that's the good news of the bad news, right? So at least once you know that that's the case, you have an access to doing something about it, right?
And it's all, as you know, it's all about literally creating a climate where people are able to remove, we spoke about uncertainty and its impacts on anxiety and depression, removing that personal uncertainty about people, allowing people to bring their whole authentic selves to work is the first thing.
Let's go there. What do you mean by that?
Your whole authentic self. So not feeling like they have to hide any part of themselves personally, that will impact on them professionally. We talk about equity and diversity. We talk about everything that you can use to discriminate someone. As putting that all on the table, everyone turns up and is taken on their pure face value. And what comes out of your mouth and the actions you provide each and every day, we say daily renewable contract, is your contribution to the team. Nothing else. That's what I'm talking about.
So I clearly heard in that when you're... Well, simple terms, my brain, because I like to simplify things, is the not having anything hidden.
Absolutely. Not feeling like you have to have anything hidden. So this is my context. For my 16 years in the military, 9 years in Special Forces, I was a gay man.
Yes.
And you know what? Since this coming out as a gay man, I never came out. I just actually accepted that I was gay. There was no big statement.
Right.
I have all these colleagues saying, hey man, like we wish you had have told us. And I was like, yeah, but it never impacted on me. I didn't want people seeing it as a weakness. But the simple fact is that unless you are 100% emotionally committed to what you're doing, so for me, there might have been 5 or 10% of my emotions constantly worried if someone was going to find out or putting energy into that finding out.
Yes.
I was subtracting from 5 to 10% of additional performance I could have put into, and literally being happy. The happier I am just being me and doing what I loved, the better I could have been. That's what I'm talking about. Not feeling like you need to hide any part of you from judgment as long as it's not illegal or unethical. Feeling like you don't have to hide any part of you, not wondering about being critiqued personally, but actually who you are and what you bring to the table each and every day. That's what we're talking about.
Totally. So I want to go back to the moment this happened, right? So the defining moment where you no longer had the experience of. So I know there was no big party, right? Yeah. No big party, no big announcement, blah, blah, blah. I got that.
Yeah.
So for you, though, there would have been a defining experience of change for you where you made that transition. Can we talk about what that was like and what happened for you?
To be honest, it's been just such a slow and gradual process. So, for example, it actually started for me. 2015, I was posted over to the American Special Forces, which had just come out of its Don't Ask, Don't Tell, was going through, and it was such an interesting climate. It was all males, all hyper alpha males. They were going through things like opening up their selection course to females, and we're sitting there on large town hall conversations. We're like, right, we're happy to have females, but we're not going to have gays because I can't trust them. And I'm sitting there as the only Australian. I'm like, it wasn't my place. We'll talk about physical and moral courage.
Oh my God.
I've had so many occasions in combat where I've displayed, high levels of physical courage, but I've struggled to show the moral courage that I needed to stand up and be counted. And that's a bit of a regret of mine. But at the same time, I had friends in Los Angeles, and that's for the first time where I socialized as a gay man, but still very quietly. And I met, professional Disney executives. I met heads of business and enterprise over here, and I actually realized that, hey, it actually doesn't matter what label you have. It's the person you are. And I've said this to you before, daily renewable contract. I was preaching but not practicing that. And the biggest defining part for me was talking to some of these people, and it's now the two lenses that I talk through being responsibility and entitlement. As soon as you start looking at any of these minorities or these elements of discrimination as an entitlement, you're immediately looking for a self-serving cause and losing your ethos and losing your purpose. Looking at it as a responsibility, it's actually a responsibility for me to be the best that I can be as being a gay man, as being a person, as being what I am every single day. And just that context of responsibility versus entitlement was a huge sort of defining moment for me that I started to grasp in 2015. And literally recently in the last year, with everything that's been going on in the world, is something that I now like, hey, I get it. Like every success you have, every piece of authority or rank or position or anything you have, carrying it as a responsibility as opposed to entitlement helps me to maintain authenticity in my purpose, in my cause, and in my outputs and what I'm doing.
So was there...
So there was no watershed moment, I'm sorry, but it has just been a trickle feed, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I also get that, I mean, this is what shows up a lot, and I think it's important because often people sense that there has got to be a moment.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to the fact that we are talking like this about that because, you know, and let's face it, I asked that and I think that helps people see, oh, you mean I don't have to wait for some light bulb to come on. It's just, you know, were there things, and I think for myself too, if I look at sometimes about implementing certain changes that I want to have happen, or I see something new and I think, okay, well, I can now change my behaviour. Were there certain things that you decided to do differently that helped you for yourself know that you were no longer going to have that sense of not having the freedom to express yourself?
Yeah, like you say, it was literally just starting to do small things.
Yeah.
You know, and growing in your confidence. Honestly, I took a lot of inspiration and motivation from others, but it's so important, like you say, there's no light bulb moment. I'm still waiting for a light bulb moment. But just the whole, I mean...
You got some examples though? Like what were some of the things that you noticed you were doing differently or saying differently?
I mean, like from changing my social media account from private to public was just a holy shit moment. Like... People are going to find out that I'm gay. Through to, I was at a...
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Like, I mean, you and I can sit here, like seriously, if you're out there and you haven't done that, seriously, I'd want you to know we get it. It's not easy. Like, it really isn't easy, but just do it.
It was horrifying.
Yes.
I was horrified. I was at a wedding of one of my soldiers, and one of the guys, his wife came over and asked me, and she's like, hey... we have a cousin who's gay and likes men. Are you like him? You know, it was the most roundabout way of asking, and I was pretty drunk at that time. And it was literally the first. No one had ever asked me if I was gay. There'd always potentially been rumors or whatnot. And it was the first person who asked me, and I said yes. And she's like, "Oh, why have you never like?" Because no one's ever asked me. Everyone's rumored and gossiped about it.
Right.
And even just that was like a holy shit. Like I'm at a wedding full of all my work people. I'm expecting her to go, "He's gay." But it was actually more so liberating.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you spend all your time defending against the possibilities of this being an attack on you.
Yes.
And as soon as you go on the front foot, it's actually disarming.
Yes.
And again, as long as you're doing it with a sense of responsibility, like I don't want you to treat me differently because I'm gay. Like the responsibility is actually on you and me to help me appreciate who I am, what I am. Like I didn't choose this, it's what I am. And the responsibility to then like carry that forward. Like the biggest regret for me, the last 5 years in particular, when I sort of had these ideas, I was in a unit of 800 people, 400 men, all special forces qualified guys. No one in that unit was gay. And by the time I finished, I was a major.
Do you know that for sure?
No, but this is it. No, this is it. Like, as in, statistically, obviously not. But as far as, no one was openly gay. And by the time I left that unit, I was one of the second highest ranks as a major. And the opportunity was that for me, actually having the courage to stand up, the moral courage to stand up and say, hey, I am a gay man. That doesn't mean shit. You will accept me on my professional competence and character.
Yes.
I could have actually helped others have the comfort in doing that. And you know what? Throughout my career, I actually had a couple of soldiers come to me with these conversations. And I, again, was too much of a coward to embrace. And I've caught up with them since leaving the military and sort of said to them, I was like, hey, man, like, I failed you as a leader because I wasn't comfortable with who I am. But I'm here and I'm here for you now.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I mean, we definitely have our regrets. And it's so funny that I have these conversations. People talk about combat, killing people, all sorts of stuff. I never struggle with that on the courage side of the house.
Yes.
I struggle with that moral courage.
Yes, yes.
And it's one of my regrets.
Well, we all have it in some area, and I think I'm reminded of a quote. I don't know who said it, but when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
Like it's like the blind spots. I mean, a lot of the work that I do is in I've got a good listening for what's in the blind spots for people, but I think we all walk around with our own blind spots, and it doesn't. And I'm also a big believer in not forcing anything.
Agree.
Because forcing something doesn't enable a person to thrive, if anything. So it's no good going and saying, hey, you need to do this or do this. And it's the same thing with this. I don't think there's a conversation called there's no right time to go take the action for you. If it is about coming out, or if it is about whatever it is for you, there's no such thing as a right time, nor put the pressure on yourself to force yourself into thinking there's a right time. It will be whenever the right time is for you, you know. And I'm also a big fan of saying to people, there's no, to never look back and wish it any other way. I know there's a lot of, I could get myself into trouble here.
Come on, be authentic.
The stories around, if I could tell my 13-year-old self.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
Your bloody 13-year-old self ain't going to listen to you. In fact, I'm pretty sure your bloody mother had plenty to say about being the best of your 13-year-old self, but you cannot hear it. And so now I get the intention, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of lessons that we learn, and if I could go back in time and take... The problem is you can't, number one, you cannot turn back time.
Yep.
Number two, if you go back and tell yourself that, you're kind of looking back and thinking you should have done something different. In my experience, in the current state... So I'm a 47-year-old woman, right? So if I sit
I
here...
had you at late 30s. You're crushing it.
Oh, man, what are you doing being gay? God, you're talking my language.
God.
Anyway, but if I sit here for myself, right, and do that, that doesn't alter my experience of myself as a confident woman now.
For sure.
What it says is I should have done something different.
Yep.
And I try wherever possible to remove any should from anything, because if I do that, I'm gone.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, I talk it in the lenses, I took it in the framework of content and context. For me, for example, last week I got to go back to the Royal Military College and talk to the second class staff cadets who are going through their officer training and talk about some of this stuff. And it's not like what I would have done differently. It's just some of the different experience, some of the different content I wish I had in my head sitting there, even at the back of my head. For then when the context presented itself, to have more knowledge and more understanding, being able to apply that to it. So I definitely wish that I was able to go back and talk to myself as a young man going through that training and be like, being gay is okay. It doesn't actually change who you are professionally. It helps you better understand who you are personally. Just even the conversations on mental health and emotional health. I was so focused on physical health back in the day.
Yes.
Mental health was weakness, and so was emotional health. It was irrelevant.
Yes.
I never had a single relationship during my entire military career until I got out. I compartmentalized emotions. Mental health was on the job focused.
Yes.
So it's actually just having conversations to break down stigma, to potentially provide information that is going to be a resource for people later in their life. And the one thing that I missed, and I hope to be able to apply to some people now, is perhaps some form of relatability and potentially aspirational measure to them if they find themselves in the same situations. Like, hey, because that's the biggest thing I had. I didn't have someone to look towards or people to look towards. I looked at Oxford Street and I was sort of scared by that because I didn't want to be like that. I didn't have the context for everything that was going on inside me.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the opportunity.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's many areas where that applies, and I suppose women in leadership is another one, right?
Absolutely.
I had a conversation just recently with a lady who's running and she's done this story filming about young girls, and her passion behind that was because there was a lack of leadership role modelling, because we're coming out of an era where that hasn't been the case.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot to be said for what you're...
And these are conversations we carry through diversity. People talk about diversity for diversity's sake. It's like there's actually such, you need to break down the purpose of why you're doing these things. People need to have diversity, one, because it creates so much more opportunities, just given the different walks of life, different morals that we bring to, different emotional intelligence we bring to situations. But then there's the second and third generation effects, whereby you're actually setting precedents to allow others to be inspired into those positions. I mean, that's it. We'll leave that. That's a big big box we can unpackage.
We can do that another time.
Yeah.
So I want to take a different view on the topic of authentic.
Let's do it.
So looking at your experience of it.
Yep.
And applying this question to your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges, do you think, for people to experience or being able to express being authentic for themselves?
Well, not just being not authentic, period. So not truly believing in what they're doing or what they need to do.
Okay. Not believing.
Not being aligned, so whereby their own personal values don't mesh with the purpose behind what they're doing. You know, let's put this in the smallest example, like a sales context.
great.
You're pushing a sale. You want someone to buy something and you're going to throw in a set of steak knives. You're not actually genuinely behind what you need to do.
Right.
Whereas I got the experience.
Right.
I got the experience to do things like, hey, I'm literally going to ask this group of men and women to go outside the wire in helicopters tomorrow, risk their life and do something. And if I didn't believe in what we were doing, and I had to stand up there and give, you know, an hour's order brief telling them what they're going to do, that's going to follow through to them. And that is going to work to degrade their motivation, their confidence in what we're doing, you know. And I had to learn how to, if I didn't believe in what I was doing, we didn't do it, you know, and have those tough conversations and really draw upon yourself to appreciate, hey, if you don't believe in what you're doing, then why are you doing it? Then it's your responsibility to then derive the reason why you should be doing that and better understand that, as opposed to going through, and particularly for me, asking others to do things that I wouldn't want to do myself is when I fall off the wagon. So that's what really motivated me in spot. And that's at the hyper apex end of, you know, motivation and life or death and all that good stuff. But it's so applicable to everything, you know, be that in a relationship. Like, where is this relationship going? What do you want from this relationship? Define the purpose and the value of this. And if it's not there, have those conversations.
Yeah.
Again,
It's like tell the truth to yourself as much as anything, because
understand what you want and why you're doing it. Like, we talk about purpose. The whole thing comes down to purpose. Why you're doing something.
So is it inauthentic? One thing that I'm just struck by, is it inauthentic then to say yes to someone when you actually really don't want to do it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. I was just checking. Well, you know, because what I want to ensure is, you know, I'm really fascinated by all the different things like that you're seeing that surround being authentic.
Yep.
Because I think it's and I think this is one of the problems, Heston, is when we talk about being authentic, we don't give very practical examples. So people are kind of left in a world of not actually being able to shift anything because it's not practical.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, great.
In March, I broke up with my partner of 4 years. We brought Barry's boot camp to Australia and Singapore and everything else in between. And to be honest, we should have been over about a year ago. And I was too busy. At that time, I'd left Barry's, I'd left the military. I was already sort of struggling with a loss of identity, a loss of confidence. And in the sort of gay world, we were constantly reached out to as, quote, like a power couple. You know, we sort of maintained this image. And I got stuck to that image. And I was too embarrassed for people to appreciate that I'd failed at something, being a relationship. And we've broken up. It's amicable. It should have broken up a long time before that. But it was only actually, again, appreciating that, one, I'm human, you know, and not holding on to something that was there for a purpose other than anything that was authentic. You know, part of me, and I degraded physically in my own physical fitness, my own mental fitness, my emotional fitness. And only since leaving that relationship have I been able to build myself back up and appreciate, hey, like, you were doing that for a cause that was anything other than authentic to you. You were doing it for what other people thought, as opposed to what made you feel valued and loved and what helped you tick. And it's only through hindsight and context you can go, holy shit, like, I need to let go of these images. You know, making money, being in the perfect relationship, all these things, you need to figure out what makes you happy. And that is the true authentic you that you need to, like, pursue.
So that's a real challenge. I'd say very challenging because, you know, relationships are very challenging, right? I think you picked a topic that I think is good because no doubt a lot of people would find this that hard place to work at it. But you get into a relationship, you know, with all, I don't know, thinking it's all amazing and great. And it does feel that way, right? Always. It's like the honeymoon period when you always get in a relationship and then it gets harder and it gets harder. Of course that's the case, right? But at what point does someone know the difference between whether or not they're just going through a period or a block and, you know, they've got to just, you know, just work through that? When does it become just working through that or actually getting really, well, no, actually, it's not really the right thing?
I mean, it's the good old frog in hot water and turn up slowly, or jump
I've
straight,
heard that one a few times.
jump straight into the pot. I mean, look, the key thing is, can you have a relationship can you have a conversation like we're having now? As you know, it all comes down to communication, and honestly, like authentic communication, not lying to the person holding things back. But if you can't have this conversation, it's like, hey, like, what's your love language? What's my love language? Like, what do I do that makes you feel really valued and makes you love me more, or what do you hate? I wish over the last year we just sat down and spoke and had these deep conversations. But instead, my motivation was keeping things bright and glossy and an outwards facing culture, as opposed to an actual inwards facing culture that reflected the true authentic self and true authentic situation. It's just, honestly, it's communication.
Yeah.
It is just so 101, but it's actually doing what you say you're going to do. I mean, that's the integrity, communication integrity. They're the key parts of a relationship for me.
So just
not that I'm a relationship expert at all. I'm much better at teaching and coaching than I am at doing myself.
So a couple of things, because again, my experiences with these things, I can always talk forever.
Oh, I can imagine.
Everything that we've kind of talked about is shaping some kind of purpose or passion for you, right?
Yep.
So let's just go there briefly. What is that now for you? What's the thing that you're out to shift or transform or be? What's your passion?
So I honestly am struggling with my own purpose at the moment. My purpose, my love language is acts of service. My purpose is always others. So in the military, the cliche is the mission, the men, the me. I am fantastic with people and projects. I'm fantastic at supporting others to achieve their missions. I'm fantastic achieving other purposes and passions of others. And at the moment, for me to focus on myself is actually one of the hardest things to do. So I'm taking the time to really get in and dig into my head and, to be honest, get a lot of this content out of my head. Now I have the context that is wanting to support and help people going through transitions in their own lives. So my first focus is supporting veterans transitioning from defence to basically just help them learn how to live as best they can in a quickest pattern, as opposed to like going through the life experience. We need to talk about things like drugs and alcohol. We need to talk about things like anxiety and depression. We need to talk about things like, hey, people aren't going to do what you tell them to do anymore. Common sense stuff, but unless you have the conversations, people are sitting there unpicking themselves slowly. And again, I am a smart, lazy person. So if I can help someone put that together, we'll do it. Through to, people who are coming to grasp with their own sexuality, like me, just appreciating that I spent over a decade not fully applying the full emotional power I had to something because I wasn't confident with who I was sexually. It is ridiculous to look back in hindsight, but that is what it is. And now, unfortunately, I have this image that I'm not holding to, but others hold to, as like a accomplished special forces, big bicep guy, blah. If I can put that profile to good use to help someone who is young and struggling with sexuality, then that is my responsibility. And honestly, that derives me with so much personal purpose.
Yeah. I kind of picked up on this before, but it's just come to fruition again, which was the decision making around what happens when you make that transition from the prior state to the outcome.
Yep.
And I say that because when you just mentioned that, for you it was around your sexuality and that you weren't able to release your full, your peak performance, like there was that little bit emotional level that just was missing, right?
Yep.
And we see this a lot. It doesn't have to be, number one, about sexuality for anyone. Wherever one's holding oneself back for fear of something means there's not really giving themselves the space to experience profound sense of fulfillment or satisfaction and ultimately their best performance, right?
That's it. It's that emotional alignment. We go to a chiropractor for our physical alignment. Being emotionally aligned to what you do, just being complete internally. And again, not missing that emotional power, but having it misdirected in somewhere else, unless it's fully focused to where you can be. How are you going to achieve your ultimate outcome?
Absolutely. And so what I want to ask is the question for people to consider, because I want people, I'm always looking for, I want an impact.
Yeah.
Right. I hate the old, I had 20 odd years in corporate, right? And it's all really great to go to a seminar and listen to great information and get bits and pieces and you walk back out, it was really great, and then nothing changes, right?
Yep.
So I'm always listening for what is the thing that I think can be applied. And I think out of this conversation for me, the one thing and the question I'll ask now is, if you look at for yourself about what is the thing that you've got hidden and what is the story that you're telling yourself that's keeping you not doing it. I don't know if that made sense, but there's something that you're not doing or taking action on. AKA in your situation, you weren't expressing yourself around your sexuality, but you had a reason for it. You were telling yourself certain things about why it's not okay to do that.
Yep.
And we all do that. We don't go and, take an action, or we don't go and start a business, or we don't go and quit the company, or we don't leave a relationship, or we don't do these things because we have a valid reason why not.
Yep.
Now, I call that a story.
Yep.
So when I say story, that's what I'm saying. You're telling yourself all these reasons for why you're not doing something. And why I'm calling it a story is because ultimately it is. It's a fabrication of the truth. It's not the truth, but you're telling yourself it in a way that you believe it to be the truth.
Yes.
So you've got to dismantle the truth that you're telling yourself, which is actually a lie.
Yep,
you're telling yourself a lie, which is why we call it authentic, because you've got to stop bullshitting to yourself. So whatever it is for you right now, where you're not releasing your fullest potential and you have a reason for it, your job is to write down all the reasons why you're not doing it.
Yep.
Because unfortunately, you're actually manifesting everything that you think is real to be real by the fact that you're not taking action.
Absolutely. I mean, this is it. The question is, are you being your authentic self? And now we're really working to define what that means. Even take that a step out. If you were watching this and you could see into every single decision someone's making, would you be happy with the fact that you're actually not being authentic, or you're not actually bringing your full self to it? And I mean, look, we could talk about this all day, but it's like we literally have like one life. We sort of go through all this time, and I went through so much time worried about what others will think. And it's like, what the fuck have I... Sorry. What... What
it's
have you,
me.
what have you got to lose? And particularly when I unpick myself and appreciate how much of my purpose and motivation is derived by others, by not being true and authentic to myself, I'm actually potentially not being supportive as I best can be to someone else, or someone else who needs it more than me. So it's really, for me, delinking it, like it's actually being selfish if I'm holding myself back, or if I'm lying to myself, because in this world where, one stone hits the pond and those ripples flow through, you literally have nothing else to lose. And it is my responsibility now, not an entitlement to look for pity, to look for empathy or anything else, my responsibility to be the very best that I can be. And what I've learned is that only happens when I'm truly personally and emotionally and intellectually and mentally aligned and authentic.
You remind me when you were describing I actually can't even remember the words you said now, but I'm present to, that experience when you first, and I don't ever remember doing this personally. I've seen the version on the movies, but my personal version was when you go to the old swimming pools and they've got the very high diving boards, and you're petrified. Like I remember taking my kids and they were like, no, just go on this one, because this is a safe one. I'm like, no, go to the tall one, jump off. And I remember for myself, I can't remember, maybe I was about 14 at the time and went white to the top, and I was petrified. Except once I'd done it, oh man, you could not get me going fast enough to go off more and more and more, right? But I'm reminded also of, movies I've seen where it's more like jumping out in the lake and it's freezing cold, but you notice that they do it, and then a second that it's done, you're thriving and you enjoy it. It's just that initial action that's got to be taken.
Absolutely, that confidence. And I mean, for me, it took so much throughout so many occasions in my life that haven't been, combat confidence, career confidence. It takes the environmental conditions, others around you, and that's where again, us having these conversations, it's part of our responsibility. If we have lived through these occasions that provide us with the opportunity to help others going through it, like that's it. Like that needs to be experienced. You don't need to sit there, write a book and do all this sort of stuff. Again, through the lens of responsibility, not entitlement.
Yes.
I don't want you to listen to me because I have this experience. I want to talk because I can potentially help others because I have this experience.
Yes. So to wrap up, I think we've already done a very good job on talking about one of the things, clearly what's been some of the biggest challenges and stuff you've gone there. So what I'd like to do is finish on the statement about being a leader, which I'd like you to complete for me.
Okay.
A leader is someone who
inspires others to be the best they can be.
Beautiful. Now, how can people reach out to you?
That's
a good question, he says, because I'm still working that out.
Leave me alone.
Well, you're on social media, yes?
Yeah, I was going to say social media seems to be the biggest one.
Yeah.
Honestly, if someone ever wants to, I'm an email machine.
Are you?
Just because I can sit there and chew on it. So they can send me an email, heston.russell@gmail.com, or you
Okay.
can reach out to me on social media.
Yeah, right. Well, what we'll do is we'll put the social handles in there anyway.
Yeah, cool.
I think that's always an easy bet, and then but we'll also make sure that we can get your email if you want people to reach out to you that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me and
That's-
reaching out, and for the mission that you're on. It's so good. Just that, like, even just having these conversations again helps you unlock the content in your own head.
Yeah.
And personally, like, gives me more confidence to go out and have more of these conversations. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you just sit there inside your own head all day.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think it might leave on the theme here, which is really about in support of or in service of others.
Yeah.
I do often wrap up with the completion on these things about people taking action. And, I think it would be great to hear from people, what have you taken out of today's conversation? What is the thing that you opened up or discovered that has been holding you back? And, do reach out and send us some messages either on social media or send us an email. Let us know one of the things that you did, or certainly reach out if you're a bit stuck and you do want to get that breakthrough, because both of us are pretty passionate about that. So thanks again.
Pleasure. Wouldn't it be so disappointing if you're the only person holding yourself back?
I know,
Take some
right?
action.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, Carly.